it's not there. And so that's why this month of June, I think, will be fascinating to see if they can finally get their act together.
Welcome into Northside Territory. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my co-host Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers for The Athletic. This is your Cubs podcast. We are going to be talking about the reeling Cubs, losers of 6 straight series. Patrick, I said it before this weekend. This is where you got to start to make ground. I looked it up before play on Sunday. 25 straight games. They're in the midst of 25 straight games against teams that are not 500, below 500. And that started with this series with the Reds. So it's not like it's over. That stretch has just begun. This is the stretch where you start to make some moves. In theory, either you're one of those teams in the middle, or you make some ground and you push up and you say like, hey, we're right there with the Brewers.
Yeah, I mean, we're 60 games in. I think that's a good snapshot. You got a team that's under 500, negative run differential, lost 6 straight series, including against all 4 of your divisional opponents. And as you know, I'm not a big math guy, but like to get to 90 wins at this point, I think they got to go 61-41. Don't see that happening. I think this start has definitely ratcheted up the pressure on this team. It's significantly decreased the margin for error, and it's led to a lot of, wide-ranging questions of like where this team is headed. What do you got? What do you see coming?
Yeah, one question I see a lot, that I hear a lot, and that now people are starting to doubt the move was like, what's the point of hiring Craig Counsell if you're gonna get the same results, right? Here's the thing. I think it's kind of silly to start questioning Craig Counsell as a manager. I think it's an overreaction. Yes, the Brewers are playing very well. I wouldn't suggest that has anything to do with Craig Counsell leaving. Like we've said before on this podcast, I think that has to do with they're a well-run organization. Like the Cubs need to get to that point where no matter who's in charge, no matter who you trade, you make the right moves and you're able to kind of stay at a high level. But Craig Counsell is like, he's managing a team that's not playing as well. Part of what, when a lot of last year, when we talk about David Ross, I felt like my point kept being like, this is more than David Ross. Is David Ross a great manager? I'm not sure about that. Not yet. Mm-hmm. He was probably an average manager, right? If you want to point to some issues from last year, it's probably overworking the bullpen. He went pedal to the metal kind of out of necessity, right?
Yeah.
Like they were 10 games under and he had to like ride his relievers who he only had like 4 of that he could trust. It didn't work out. They ran out of gas, right? But the team also, if you want to point to issues, right? If you say like this team should be better, this team should be winning more games, and there were underlying numbers like base runs, Pythagorean record, which is basically run differential, that said they should have. Those numbers aren't saying that. Those numbers right now have the Cubs, like you said, they're minus 12 in run differential. Base runs has them. They're actually winning. They've won one more game than expected. Like they're a better team than they should be with the way they're performing.
Yeah.
Now, is that on Craig Counsell that they're not performing as well? I think it's the players. I think just like last year when when people were complaining, I think majority of this falls on the players. They're not delivering. They're not performing. Like I don't know what buttons he's supposed to push to make this a better team right now. They're trying all sorts of things, evidenced by calling up David Bodie,
right?
So it's not like he's literally talking about David Bodie being a power bat against lefties, and I'm kind of taken aback by this. By like this can't be the difference for this team. This can't be what flips a switch. That has to be the stars playing like stars. And like, if you wanted to point to Saturday as like some moment, it almost immediately disappears in the second inning yesterday, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Momentum is not a thing really in baseball. It is in a game, I believe. I believe within the game there is momentum. Um, Saturday they swung that momentum, right? It felt like it all went towards the Reds when Saya drops that ball and he hits the grand slam, and you feel like, okay, they've swung the momentum in their favor, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Second inning on Sunday, it felt like a moment. Ben Brown loads the bases, no outs. And it was like a soft hit, a hard hit on a good pitch. And then he hit a batter that was kind of like, if you look at the replay, that dude just stuck his leg into the pitch. But,
Whatever you got to do. Yeah.
Yeah, right. He got on base, bases loaded. Jonathan India hits a sac fly. Will Benson strikes out. And you're thinking 1 run, bases loaded, no outs. That's momentum in Cubs' favor if Ben Brown gets out of this. 0-2 on TJ Friedel. Cubs are getting out of this. And then he leaves a curveball, just hangs it in the zone, middle. Friedel doesn't miss it, which the Cubs have missed a lot of those pitches too. And it goes from 1-0 to 4-0. It goes from Ben Brown wriggling out of a jam to the Reds kind of took advantage of that moment. And the Cubs just have not done that. They have not taken advantage of any moments that they have. Any of those like small mistakes that the other team made outside of the first couple weeks of the season, they just have not done that. Like their numbers with runners in scoring position with 2 outs. And I'm not saying like you're supposed to be awesome in those situations all throughout a season, but they can swing like how you feel about a game, how you feel about a team, how you feel about an offense. And the Cubs are like batting like 190 something with runners in scoring position and 2 outs. Third worst in baseball. I think the Cardinals and White Sox. The White Sox are just like the worst at every, like you put in any stat into Fangraphs. It's like, who's the worst? It's the White Sox. We'll get to the White Sox in a soon, like pretty soon. And
that is the ultimate crosstown preview of just go to whatever category in Fangraphs and see who's 29th and 30th, and there's good chances that you'll see like the Cubs and/or White Sox in almost every, including meet me in the parking lots as well.
So I mean, if you can't like. There's so many, like the runners in scoring position stats are at a point where it has to flip, right? It's one of those things that like the offense may not be good this year, but also like runners in scoring position can't be this bad all season long.
Yeah, I'm with you on the momentum stuff. I think that's just a tired kind of concept in general of like, hey, this late game comeback that, I mean, we were talking to Dansby in the Wrigley clubhouse, and it was technically Sunday morning. This was well after midnight. They had to, I think one player was joking like, you'll be seeing me in the same clothes, for pregame tomorrow. And then another reliever was joking like, I think it was Stretch was like noon, was like, I'm just gonna go straight to the bullpen when I show up to the ballpark and do my stretching throws there. Like it was just kind of a delirious moment. Or the like, hey, battling back in the 9th to only lose by 1 or 2 runs instead of 3 or 4 runs, like don't care. But I do think there's momentum within seasons. Like I think confidence comes and goes. I think there is organizational momentum of like if certain things hit, then who knows what that will mean for the front office or ownership, what they're willing to do moving forward, and especially around a team like the Cubs. Like we've talked about this before, the highs are exaggerated and the lows are exaggerated as well. And it's like impossible to totally wall all of that off. And, we do see here, Craig Counsell hasn't changed. And I don't think he's like absolutely at fault for everything that's gone on in the Cubs organization that preceded his arrival. But it's hard to say like, he's doing a great job. I mean, you are what your record says you are, and we haven't seen some huge transformation in this team. And now I do think within the clubhouse, they would say what they're expecting is that August, September extra energy and stamina to go all the way through. I think he's a pretty conservative manager in that regard. And that's where, I think in the bullpen, they expect to feel that to not feel run into the ground shortly after the trade deadline, but and momentum too of like Ben Brown. I thought that was a great moment to zoom in on for your takeaways column today in The Athletic, wrapping up that series of like, obviously you can't get down whatever 4 or 5 runs early. That's not a winning formula, but part of this year is Ben Brown figuring stuff out. And like, we all know he has the physicality to be a major league starter. He's got great stuff. He's like a curious, thoughtful guy who wants to get better. So he's probably going to learn a lot from that. You know, that was a big moment. Did not execute. You would hope that he's going to be better next time, but like, we don't know how long Ben Brown is going to like stay healthy or how long his run will last. And so it's like, if he's throwing 7 no-hit innings, like you gotta kind of ride that wave with him, you know, for however long it lasts. And like, it's hard to just think like, oh, Ben Brown's like good, so like let's just pencil him in for like next 5 years. Like that's just not how pitching works. So you kind of have to take advantage with this stuff, and that's what I think this past month feels like, just a massively wasted opportunity for the Cubs.
Yeah, they're not taking advantage of the good pitching, right? There's different wasted opportunities, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
In last year, the wasted opportunity was like this team is playing well and somehow they're losing games. This wasted opportunity is just like wasting a subset of the team's like high level performance.
Yeah.
Their starting pitching is performing like a top 5 unit in baseball. And they're not winning enough games. So like you said, you don't know how long that lasts, especially when you have a guy like Ben Brown as a big part of it, who, nothing against Ben Brown, he's going to wear down at some point. Like I think he's, I don't know what his career high in innings is, but it's not like significantly above 100. And he's already at what, like 60? He's at 51. And its career high is like a little over 100, like I said, so 103, I believe. So that's, you know, that's he's coming up close on that. He's already halfway there, and we're, you know, a third of the way through the season. We'll see what type of innings limit he'll be put on. Jordan Wicks is close to coming back, I believe. I think he made a start yesterday. Was that yesterday? Sunday,
I think so.
At AAA, and it council didn't have anything definitive to say there outside of we'll map out next steps once he's once that starts done and he comes out of it healthy, assuming he's healthy. So I mean, maybe that's how they limit Ben Brown's innings, but also he's been pretty damn good. Do you want to take him out of the rotation? I don't know. I think he was pretty self-aware after that game. Like, you can't make mistakes like that on 0-2. It's very funny to see a guy whose biggest question was like, can this guy throw enough strikes to, like, he threw too many strikes in this one bad start that he's had. He needs to throw a chase curveball there. Like, that's pretty, it's pretty basic stuff, right? In baseball, you get ahead 0-2, you don't throw something middle, which could just speak to command in general. He's not like some pinpoint command artist. I don't know where, like, it's starting to get to a point where even the most optimistic person has to start saying, like, where's this season going? And is this, this White Sox series is going to tell us a lot, right? We'll preview that in our next podcast. But I just think, like, you split with the White Sox, even a split, like, it's just unacceptable, and it becomes a thing where it's like, what is wrong with this team right now? They don't look to me. I don't think they're bad. I don't think they're a bad team. I just don't know. Like,
they're just not a good team.
Yeah, right now they're not good. Like, things flip, things change. It's 60 games into a season. Baseball is a weird sport where a couple hot months is all you need. Maybe a really hot stretch. 2 years ago, Matt Gelb just wrote about the 2-year anniversary of Robbie Thompson taking over the Phillies, and that team was dead. 8 games under 500 around this point in the season, and rattled off, I think, like a 15-2 run. I think they won like 86, 87 games that season. And then,
so you're suggesting the Cubs should change their manager?
yeah,
That's
maybe
what
they
I'm
should
getting.
fire Greg Counsell and have Ryan Flaherty be the manager. But I mean, so weird. Like, baseball is filled with stuff like that, but you can't, like, we were talking about this last year when they were going through the run. That can't be the talk year after year. Well, maybe they'll get hot and overcome this bad stretch of play.
Yeah.
You can't constantly be overcoming bad stretch of play. Now, I'm not saying you can't be like have bad stretches and can't be average throughout the season, but like, this is now a month-long stretch of bad baseball, especially on offense. And at a certain point, you have to just say, like, what is this team? Is this who they are? I'm not, like I said, I'm going to give it we're now 22 games. I'm giving it, I want to see what they do in these 22 games. Like, because yes, they could absolutely go 15-7 or better, around there in these next 22. And you're like, there it is. They're beating up on average or bad teams like they should, build up their confidence, go on a run, start competing. But here's the reality. Like, the Brewers are hot right now, but I was looking that they were 17-8 and the Cubs were 17-9. And that's when the Cubs started to collapse, 17-9, and they started to collapse. The Brewers are only like 4 games over 500 since that point. So it's not like they're on a nice little run now, but they're not on this insane tear since that point. The Cubs just needed to kind of play 500 ball from that point, and they'd be like right there with them.
Yeah, we talked about Ben Brown earlier because it was pertinent, and he's like an interesting new player, and it will be fun to watch, or a curiosity like how they handle it. But he didn't make the opening day roster. They've gotten basically like a best case outcome for him thus far. Like, it goes back to, look at the Brewers' best players and like how they're performing. I mean, Cubs don't have a position player like William Contreras, like a legit MVP guy who's kind of carrying the team. I mean, Terang, Adames, Joey Ortiz is a guy recently acquired. I mean, even Christian Yelich is having a really nice, very good season, and the Cubs have a former MVP who's been playing well, but not like great. And it's just the stuff like that where you're like, that this group has been together for a little bit now, and they've said continuity helps. And I'm sure that's true to a certain extent. And I think each deal or transaction has made sense. Like, very rarely have the Cubs done something you're like, well, that was crazy. Like, where did that come from? But like, put together, it has not been particularly inspiring. I mean, we were talking about this in the press box on Saturday night of, like, when that ball went up to Seiya, like, part of me felt like he could drop that. Not like saying like, oh, I called it, but like the way it just hung up there, the way he's played that night in Atlanta, like, I wasn't totally stunned. And it's just like stuff like that. It's like, yeah, he hit the grand slam to kind of, even out his plus minus on that. But like, then Justin Steele is really like laboring, like all those extra pitches and like more stress instead of like a game where, we're going alternate universe stuff. But like, what if they get that 4-1 lead early and Justin Steele cruises, and then you're like, bullpen is, organized for the next day. Like all that stuff adds up. And these little things that the Cubs have not been doing, like, it's setting up kind of like last year of them having to expend so much to get back above 500 and give themselves some breathing room. And then you look up and there's still like 2 months, 6 weeks, a month left in the season. And like, how much do you have left in the tank?
Right. You don't want to fall any further back than you are right now. Right now is you've reached this point where it's like, okay, like, there's no more waiting. There's no more like, let's see what they can do. It's like that they have to it has to start right
Made
now.
7.5 back
Yeah,
already.
right.
In a bad division.
You're talking about you're starting to think about like what's the wild card situation, which the reality is it's very doable because there's like
Yes.
3 good teams in the NL with Philly, LA, and Milwaukee, and I think that's right. And then the rest is like yes, Atlanta. So there's 4 good teams, and Atlanta is playing well, but they're without their superstar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Padres are only 2 over. I mean, give me a break here. The Cardinals are in the final wild card spot. Uh, like, so these things can turn. The Cardinals everyone said they were dead a few weeks ago. So, like, it so baseball is just sometimes a little stupid with the way it doesn't make sense. But that's what we get for analyzing a game. You know, weekly or daily when it's spread out over 6 months, right? It like these weird things happen, and sometimes it doesn't make much sense. But like I said, it needs to turn. This has gone on long enough to the point where you have to say like we need to see some real action and something happen with the team to make you feel like, okay, where this is the guy you can trust to kind of turn things. I was looking at good offenses, right? And we've talked about this a lot, Patrick, about the lack of a superstar.
Yeah.
And that the offense is starting to show some signs, right? Like where you're like, okay, the players that they're kind of built around are playing decently well, right? Like Seiya Suzuki's starting to hit. Cody Bellinger had a nice 3-hit game.
Yeah.
Ian Happ has been a little inconsistent, but he's hitting. So you have these producers, these guys that should be good enough to like be on winning teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
But where's the guy that you like? I really think some of these 2-out situations, these runners in scoring position, you have a Juan Soto in there. You have I mean, like just go to whatever offense you want to go to, the Houston Astros and Kyle Tucker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, whoever on the Dodgers, William Contreras, Christian Yelich, right? Gunnar Henderson on Baltimore, Bryce Harper, like those type of players, right? That you have just one of those, and you surround them with guys that the Cubs already have that are like 120, 125. Maybe they have a good season. It's 135, 140 weighted runs created plus. And now you're talking about a different team. It's just hard to find those guys, right?
Yeah.
Either you're aggressive in the trade market and free agency, or you develop one. Jed seems to be going the route of like wanting to develop one. It hasn't happened. Like, could it? I felt like Seiya could have been that guy coming into the season. That injury really derailed any chance of it. He still could be. He still could end the season with like a 145 weighted runs created plus. We've seen him get insanely hot. It's not like he's having a bad offensive season overall. It's just it'd be real nice for this team to have that guy to kind of stabilize things when it feels like it's getting out of hand. And it's like, oh, wait, we still have this guy, and he's going to go off in a game. He's going to come through. He's up with 2 outs and a man on third. He's going to drive that guy in. He'll find a way to get that hit.
I was saying the exact same thing. It felt like on my Twitter timeline, there's just a lot of Soto and Judge out in San Francisco this weekend, just seeing a lot of like awesome just highlights. And a friend of mine asked me yesterday, like who's the best offensive player on the Cubs? And I paused because it was sort of like a trick question. He was like genuinely curious. And I said, well, I mean, Mike Tauchman has been for a long stretch of this season. I think you would, talking to Ian Happ earlier in the year, I think he might say that Seiya is probably the most like talented hitter. And I think there are people within the Cubs organization who kind of, have looked at Seiya as having all the attributes of that hitter you described, Sahadev, but that has not translated on a consistent, impactful basis. We've talked about Christopher Morel as maybe being that guy someday, but his actual statistics have not borne out what we see on some of the other data points and just his physical traits that you think, oh, like this is what a really talented middle of the order hitter could be. He hasn't quite been that. He's been okay, but not like wow. And then Bellinger has been that guy in the past, but I don't know if he's ever going to be that guy again. And he's versatile, he's valuable, a really good, nice fit on this team, but like pretty sure he's making more money this year than Bryce Harper, right? I mean, and like that's kind of the stratosphere that he's getting paid on an annual basis. And it's a good player, but not like a wow performance yet. Maybe he gets hot. And then, Dansby got paid for his defense and the position he plays. And I still think he'll be, fine in the long run. He hasn't been like great offensively, but I still saw enough last year. I get why they did that. If I was a GM, I'd like having him up the middle. Same with Nico. I think a really impactful player on a good team. But again, like someone who might make an all-star team in his career, not like a perennial like MVP vote getter. And then we're just going up and down the lineup around the diamond. I mean, the Cubs catching situation, I think you're going to be writing about that soon. Or maybe you did write about it, and then Willie Harris and Nick Madrigal ruined your Friday afternoon. But like the catching situation is one of the worst in baseball. And that's like Yan Gomes has been very good throughout his career, and Miguel Amaya could have a very long career. But at this moment, when we talk about momentum, it's not there. And so that's why this month of June, I think, will be fascinating to see if they can finally get their act together.
You want to hear something good, Patrick? You want to hear something that they did well? I don't have the exact numbers, but I just anecdotally watching the games, they controlled the Reds' running game.
That's right.
They had like at least they had 2 pickoffs yesterday. I think there were more. I think there were others over the weekend. So there's that. They also kept Ellie De La Cruz off the bases, which helps when you want to control the running game.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm grasping at straws when I say that, and I'm kind of tongue firmly in cheek when I say that, because I came into the weekend. Yes, I was ready to write about the catchers and how bad they've been at pretty much everything that you can measure, right? There are certainly intangibles, and when you go around that room and talk to the pitchers, even off the record, I don't hear any grumbling, and that's not always been the case. So you can take that for what it is, but numbers wise, what we have access to, that they're not great. And I still plan on writing about that. One of the things Counsell said when I asked him about it was like about the ability to control the running game was we have to help them. And I think that, he showed me what that meant over the next 3 games by throwing over there a lot at first and getting a lot of pickoffs. And I think one of the pickoffs was Drew Smiley, I want to say. I believe it was, Drew Smiley pitched yesterday on Sunday. I believe it was the 3rd pickoff. He went there a 3rd time and got the guy. So, that they were being aggressive with that. So, it's just one little thing. I think that's good coaching. That's good managing. That's noticing an issue with your team and saying, how do we correct this? Well, we can't make the catchers, we can't immediately fix the catchers, right? Like whatever Miguel Amaya needs to work on with his transfer and things like that to get the ball down to second, that can be worked on over time. This is a guy that had Tommy John surgery, 3 years ago now?
Something like that, yeah.
So maybe he's not like, I'm just trying to think through this, and so they found a way to control a team that is a menace on the base paths, because it certainly, I felt like, cost them some runs in Milwaukee and has even prior to that. So that's a small little thing where you say like, oh, they addressed that issue. Now, what's the magic he can pull to address the runners in scoring position? I don't know. He was pretty clear that it will turn. He didn't mince words. He said, "I'm telling you, we will hit with runners in scoring position at some point this season." And you know what? I agree with him because this happens almost every year to almost every team where they hit a lull. The question is, it's not about runners in scoring position. It's about all situations. Are they a good enough offense?
Yeah, I think with Counsell, I think we've both kind of heard this, and he's someone who's hyper aware of, like, pitchers' times to the plate in the minor leagues, like a supremely prepared manager. And there are obvious areas where the Cubs can improve. I think it's just been confusing or surprising as to how poorly the Cubs have performed on those little things. Like, it's not a particularly like great base running team, like the defensive breakdowns. And it's like, when you build this team around certain principles without a ton of margin for error, and like you don't do the little things well, and you don't like bank enough wins early, it's going to be a really stressful back half of the season. I still think all of their goals are still in front of them. It's a lot harder path now to get to the playoffs, but it's not like a totally impossible or unreasonable to think that it can happen. And frankly, like, it should happen at this point in the rebuild, with the resources that have been put into this team, the hires that have been made, the deals that have been struck. Like, there are a lot of things that have made sense on paper as they've gone through this kind of A to B to C rebuild, but it's just not there yet. And they've got, I wrote the other day, basically 2 months to get their act together before the trade deadline. And then, it'll be time for some reinforcements that,
Right.
They got to prove that they deserve that. I don't foresee, this is probably another episode, I don't need to start it now, but don't foresee a scenario in which they're selling. Our colleague Jim Bowden has them firmly on the list of buyers that just came out. Would totally agree with that assessment. And I think that will be revealing of, go ultimately payroll wise, who they give up, what they target. And I guess if we're leaving it on positive thoughts, it would be like what Jim Bowden mentioned of, if they stay healthy, the Cubs have the starting pitchers that you feel pretty good about in a short playoff series.
Right.
That have the pitching to keep them competitive on a nightly basis. It's just like everything else has to get better fast.
Right. And I think what you said there about them not selling is important to like reinforce with the fan base who thinks like they should just sell. Like, first of all, they're half game out of a playoff spot right now.
Yeah.
Second of all, you have to always weigh what pieces you have to sell and where you are in your contention cycle, where you think you are, right? This is a season where they think they're entering their contention cycle. Do they see themselves as a 9,500 win team? No, but they see themselves as a playoff team. So they're not going to, like, just like, and I'm not saying they're going to win the World Series, but just like the 2021 Braves, who weren't in the thick of things, Anthopoulos looked at it and said, this is where my team is. We're in our cycle. So I'm going to make some small moves to see if I can help the team. That worked out perfectly, right?
Yes.
But this is a situation where maybe Jed's like, I'm going to make some tweaks to the roster to see what I can do to improve the team. Or maybe they get hot and he can, go be a little bit more aggressive. We'll see. Like, I had this team at 90 to 92 wins because of the trade deadline, because I thought there'd be like 5-6 games over 500 or whatever around the trade deadline, and then make a big enough move to be like, oh, now they're really good. Now they're going to have a hot final 2 months and get to 92 wins. That's kind of how I saw it. So for my prediction to come true, I needed them to be a decent team, not a great team before the trade deadline, and get, hot in this final few months, which is a characteristic of a Counsell team in general, right? And if he has the right trade deadline, maybe that happens. But I think you said it early on, like 90 wins is going to be pretty damn hard with where they are right now. But 2 games against the White Sox, I believe we're planning to have a guest, Patrick, for that. And we'll preview. I a team that's just woof. You think you're struggling to watch the Cubs. The White Sox are just dreadful in every aspect of the game. They're a little bit entertaining with Tommy Pham, though. I'm not sure how much of that you saw online yesterday, Patrick, but
that was great. That is kind of what my hope for this Cubs Sox series is, that we get some of that drama, some of the old Cubs Sox mojo that it's really harder to summon up these days. I think the game has changed. The personalities have changed a little bit, but I don't know, putting those two teams together, particularly in I like the shorter 2-game window, stuff can happen, and I'm curious to see what it is. I won't make any predictions yet. We'll get into that tomorrow, but it's usually a good time. Cubs Sox night games at Wrigley. Something will happen. I think you can book that.
Yeah, Chris Flexen on Tuesday, Eric Fetty, so one of their better pitchers on Wednesday.
Okay.
So they don't miss the two really good pitchers that the White Sox have in Fetty and Crochet. They miss Crochet, but they get Fetty. We'll see if the offense can find a way to get going against a subpar opponent. Thank you guys for listening. This is Northside Territory. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. Make sure to read mine and Patrick's work at The Athletic. Thanks so much for listening. Take care, all.
Eric Kratz here from FT. I'm a former athlete that really pays attention to his routine. And AG1 every morning before my workouts is something that gets my day going.
Hey, Braun here. AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that delivers daily nutrients and gut health support, and it's backed by multiple research studies so you can trust what you're putting in your body.
Unlike other products which only test their ingredients in isolation, AG1 tests their formula as a whole.
Ready for this stat? 97% of people in a research study felt more energy after 30 days of drinking AG1. If I had to recommend one product to support whole body health, it's AG1, and that's why FT is excited to have them as a new partner. Starting your journey with AG1 is a win. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/foul. That's drinkag1.com/FOUL. Go check it out, FT fam.